and welcome to a very special episode of The Wave, the wonderful Alberni Valley experience. We are coming to you live from our studio here in the unceded territories of the... Oh my goodness. I got up there, it's off.
He was told.
Yeah, always told.
Anyway, sorry for that little kerfuffle. I'm your host, Don Texan. We're coming to you live from our studios here at the unceded territories of the Taxat and Hoopachesit peoples. And I would just like to introduce my guest. We're going to be talking about something very near and dear to my heart, and near and dear to the heart of our guests as well. But before we do that, let's go to Carol Ann, my
Don.
co-host.
Thanks. I'm looking forward to tonight's episode, talking about Indigenous matters. Very exciting. And I'd like to introduce you to our guests. Today we have Trevor Little. Trevor, do you want to say hi and tell us who you are, what you do?
Sure. Hello, Uktama, Trevor Little. Naslit, the traditional name, right here.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it's an honor to be here. I'm a father of 4. I've got a wife who I had home, and I'm a school teacher / coach and work with children in care.
Welcome. Thanks, Trevor.
Thanks for being here.
We have Jeffrey Cook. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Jeff.
Hi there, I'm Yathu. I'm from the White First Nation, and I basically lived in the valley, Port Alberni Valley, for 60 plus years. I count my youth years because I went to the residential school here for 13 years, so I count those as living in the valley. Other than that, I lived in Huayt, Anakla, and Kildone and Sarita during my summer holidays. And father of 3, and got four other kids that live with us. So here we are.
Well, thanks for being here, Jeff.
The topic of September 3rd. What are you expecting moving forward after the official declaration of the National Day of Truth and, I'll try to say it, reconciliation? Did I say it right?
Reconciliation. But it's okay. We still
I have a hard time.
Yeah.
I'm an ESL student or whatever.
It's all right.
So moving forward, September 30, 2021 was the official declaration that is now that special day for your people, right? So how do you feel about that? Is that...
Well, I think it's a start. I know the Orange Shirt Day was probably the catalyst to recognize that day anyway. But because it's been held on that day for the last 2 years now to recognize the Orange Shirt Day. So I feel it's a start. I think we got a bit of ways to go yet. To me, we should be recognized that 365 days of the year. But to have it officially recognized by the government and people of Canada, I think that's a really good start.
Yeah. So speaking of start, like, do you feel like it was a long time coming? Like it's kind of late, or like 2021? I mean, this whole issue didn't start in 2020, like not even 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's been a long journey for a while, especially me, because I've been like I said in my introduction, I've been to the residential school for 13 years, starting in 1956, and I've been in I've always known that we were treated different. So for our leaders to fight the fight and right what was been wrong and what is still wrong, and hopefully that this will get people interested in what it really means.
Yes, because I understand, but I did a little bit of research on the matter, and there's 94 points or 94 calls to action on this whole thing of reconciliation and truth. So what is the truth part? What is the focus, or what is the essence of truth and reconciliation? So reconciliation, obviously we know what we're trying to reconcile, but what is the truth part? Has there been a lie that's been festering all this time that needs to be corrected? Does the narrative of history need to be changed? And just as Trevor was mentioning, the education is slanted. So the narrative, even the education, the information that's out there is not the right information, or they're not,
well, the truth needs to be in the textbooks, and it needs to be taught.
It's not the truth.
Well, Don and Carol, I really believe that it's less slanted today, but you're allowed to slant it more and more the farther we go back in history, education, right? Yeah, and I really believe the day 30th, if we could say, came because of, an accumulated account of the history of First Nations. But when 215 came up, well, the government needed to act. And if you can tell, as the number grew, they were recording these numbers. I think they stopped near 5,000 because it was getting too bad. Mm-hmm. And if you look around the time they stopped, well, this day's being pushed because it's a big action.
Yes.
And if you noticed, after the day's been celebrated, we rarely hear those numbers growing. They're over 7,000 now, and Port Alberni hasn't even been done.
Wow.
Do we know when we're going to have that done?
Well, they're doing some work now. In fact, I just came from a meeting a couple days ago where they've got a staff together to start working on how they're going to go about it. So and interviewing former students and looking at records and trying to get that rolling. People are anxious; they want to get it rolling, but it does take time to get things organized.
Do you know how many schools are left to be done?
Yeah, I don't.
Well, there was well over.
Wasn't
100.
the last one already closed?
No,
1996.
I mean, like, to be investigated to
Right.
see,
Oh, I
right?
see.
X amount across Canada.
Yeah.
How many been done?
Yeah.
And that's not being shared as much, is it?
No, and
there's-
it should be.
Well, there's in excess of 100 schools that have been in existence,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
and right now there's maybe a dozen being investigated right now, or
Wow.
looked at. At various stages, there might be a little more.
Yeah.
So the investigation, if I understand correctly, we're kind of jumping ahead. We are going to go to the topic of residential schools. So, but the investigation only started because of the first one that was uncovered in I forget where it was.
It was Kamloops.
In Kamloops, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's say he just said a number. He said, maybe a dozen or so schools, over 100 so. So that means less than 10% of the schools have been discovered.
That's
Let's do the
heartbreaking.
Wow.
math times
Wow.
7,000.
Yeah.
I mean, that's horrific. And did they catch them all in Kamloops? Did they look at did they find them all?
No, I don't think so.
Because in Sisha territory alone, a man from Ho'eit, I'll leave his name out of it, had spoke of a spot right along the highway that's so far away from the school that this man's 7-year-old hand was the one with a group of boys digging a hole and putting kids in the.
Oh,
my.
that's
And he named this lady and where she lived, that those cedar trees standing there, totally far away from the school. Now, people were coming scanning without these information. I heard Jeff talk about they're going to have these kind of talks about where plots are. Are we going to get them all? And this one here is on our other reserve. The residential school is here. You got to go across the highway. I wonder what kind of free reign they had around our reserve.
I think no matter how many they find in the end, we need to double it.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah,
Because
that's a good call.
there's always going to be,
That's a good call.
in every situation when it's something so horrific like that.
And
So
I know
sad.
that a lot of residential schools were on near bodies of water, and we don't know
Exactly.
about those ones, eh? They disappeared.
Yeah.
Especially
Exactly.
if there's something illegal done.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Well, we are
fairly
going to
easy.
go back to the
okay. Yeah.
to the subject about the residential schools because that's a very important topic. But in the meantime, I want to go back to the National Day that was declared. How did you celebrate it?
Well,
You didn't go to the Fino, did you?
No, he came to visit me at the cafe, actually. I have to
I
say.
dropped in at the cafe before I went down
He
to
came and
the
donated
walk.
to it.
There you
I
go.
was so
Good.
impressed to see you come in there. Honestly, we thought we would do. I didn't know what to do, so
Yeah.
we thought we would do a little fundraiser, and I thought we would maybe raise $20 or $30. We topped it up ourselves, but we donated $150. But it was more people like yourself that were survivors. I had a few that came in and donated to it. It blew my mind. We were doing it for you,
Yeah.
not for you to come and donate to. I just, Jeff, it just put you up here. Like,
Yeah. Well,
It's a
I
good thing you didn't go to the Fino that day.
I wanted to support a business that recognizes the day. and
Well,
that-
we didn't know what to do.
Yeah, I know.
And
I realize that.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to support somebody that like your business and other businesses in town that were, recognizing their day, and even though they found it hard to do something or to close, or they didn't, like you were up in the air, what you should do, but you decided to stay open, but at the same time you wanted to recognize, the contribution towards your employees and the contribution you were making to the residential school, the fund that Chishad is starting.
So is that day an official, now that's been declared, it's an official statutory holiday?
No.
No?
Yes, it is.
Yes,
Yeah.
but it's not a paid statutory holiday. It's different.
The federal it is, but not the provincial or municipal. But I think they'll get there, as with any other holidays, people will start to recognize it. The governments anyway.
We don't know that though, because Aboriginal Day in June's still not a paid staff for us, right? We have Aboriginal Day in June as a national holiday, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so how does that differ from this day?
Well, this day is just to acknowledge the history, if I'm right?
I
And
see.
isn't Aboriginal Day to celebrate?
Being Aboriginal.
Yes.
I see.
Right.
So how about you, Trevor?
Yes. How I felt about the 30th.
No, how did you celebrate?
How did I celebrate?
Well, it's
I
not a
went
celebration.
a gathering.
Or,
Yeah, sure. We gathered on Isha at the end of the walk. I didn't go on the walk. I was home after school. My wife worked. I was home with my kids. But my house is right up from the gathering. And what I did in front of my daughters was, you'll see the picture that you have up there. I put my hair in a mohawk and painted my face.
Okay.
It might not be new channel to do that, but why I did it was I felt like that our voices needed to be heard. And I also felt that the wars on battlefields will not be fought anymore, but there's still a fight to fight.
Oh, definitely.
And so when I did that, I brought a talking stick, and I wanted to make sure I just shared with the people, and I wanted to look a little fierce, that there's a battle to be fought, because there is. If anything,
It is.
If anything, we have to battle to be heard. Because the celebration, the National Day, it's almost, it almost silenced the rest just to come out.
Oh, really?
Well, because we're already doing this for them, aren't we? Are they going to carry on some more? That's what we've heard all our growing. Here they go, they're carrying on about their fishing rights again. Here we go again, they're carrying on about, and we got to be careful on how we celebrate. I think if we can keep obtaining knowledge and learning the history on that day and uplifting true history, I think we're serving a good purpose there.
Is there a significance why it was September 30, or did you just coincide with Orange Shirt Day?
Yeah,
Like, do you have any
I don't know about
history or information about why that day was selected? Why September 30?
No, I really don't, other than the Orange Shirt Day. It might have been a good, I can only speculate, it might have been a good day to break up all the holidays during the year. I'm not too sure, but
Yeah.
but I think for me, this Orange Shirt Day is probably touches my heart why we have that day, and I think a lot of people recognize that day also before they recognized it as Reconciliation Day.
Okay.
So in your mind,
I thought it
Trevor,
had to do with funding. It always does. Go ahead.
so in your mind, how should we move forward?
Exactly how I say. No, I'm just how should we move forward? Learning and accepting one another. I always like to say color was the excuse. It's been created all over this world. When actually natural resource extraction was it's the reason why color was brought up, right? Division was brought up. Yeah. So I think we just need to continue absorbing this history. Why? It doesn't only help people celebrate it, you're helping us. When I know people can accept my history, what I just told you before cameras were on, when I know people can hear that and know where it comes from now and accept me, well, my family, we have a chance to stand up, because that stuff that happened in my childhood happened across the board almost. Well, how could we stand and look at each other unless we know we have acceptance? And we know other people know where this hurt comes from. That gives so many answers. That would allow many people to be able to walk back into their homelands. You know how many people are on Vancouver streets because they can't come back to a town like this because residential schools are here? They choose there because of hurt and pain.
Oh, wow.
They choose the streets because of acceptance and nobody digging into their history and childhood. You know?
So is that hurt still prevalent here in Port Alberni?
It's
think?
silent hurt, isn't it? It's there. I noticed a lot of nodding ahead. It's still here.
Do you feel that people are, with all of this and now coming out more, people are going to find it a little bit easier to be vocal about their life and what's happening?
Well, some people, it depends who you are. Some people do but do talk about their experience and how horrific it was. Other people don't want to talk about it. That's where I fit in. I guess I don't really talk about my past, my childhood, because it's, to a lot of people, it's really painful. And
but do you find, like, maybe not talking to people, randoms like us, but talking to your family and getting it out, like, say, talking to your wife about it, or just getting it off your chest?
No, because I thought about that, and I've my daughter, who's in her 30s now, and she said she's never heard me talk about it. Me and my wife went to residential also, and my wife doesn't talk about it.
No.
I think we feel more comfortable talking to other people outside our family.
Yeah.
And like you two, or maybe Trevor, I can talk to him about my experience, but I don't talk to my family about it. And there's a lot of people like that. They feel uncomfortable, talking about it.
Dynamics of silence that was created inside the school. A day inside that school, is what Grandma told me. I wouldn't know, but I couldn't imagine not being able to look at my brother while walking down the hall, or talk to my sister, or be at her aid when she's the one getting hurt.
Well, silence is a killer, really.
Yeah. And I liked what you said, Jeff, because if you're looking at healing, even in a physical way or even inside, we all do it differently. But every step of that healing is necessary. The silent, the speaker, because even the one who's silent is being released a little bit, Carol and Dawn, of something that, geez, I had this here. Well, maybe I don't need to talk about it, but hearing that there, it makes me feel okay to live with this some more. If we could look at our history, suicide was huge in First Nations communities for years. Well, maybe there wasn't enough people, Dawn and Carol, to be able to live with, because it was so hushed, no light on this topic, no understanding or empathy, but just judgments of alcoholism, of hurt and pain, of poverty, of dysfunction, that we were only left to own due to the dynamics that the silence was applied to us, Carol and Dawn.
So do you think that having the Truth and Reconciliation Day and Orange Shirt Day and everything else is going to help, because I think it is personally, but I could be wrong, with the judgments, because people like myself are learning more and knowing more and understanding more? Not that I was judgy before. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I know. I think I think once people start, the non-Aboriginal community start understanding a little more, I think our people start opening up a bit more, about what life was like and what some of the hurt we feel, because we're keeping it locked up right now because it's our story and nobody kind of believes what we're saying. But I think people are starting to understand now. What we're saying is, there was a lot of skepticism before, but now people are starting to understand that,
well, you can't be skeptical because there's numbers.
No,
like you can't hide the fact that it's happened.
Right,
it
Carol?
has. I totally think so.
Because the racism and divisions that were created in society were so harsh towards our people and towards any colored people, that how do you stand up and have pride, especially with histories like that were implemented, handed to us? Not only all the abuses you can think of, but the no speaking to family and the abuse that went on. I remember my grandma talking about, and this is a pretty horrific, but in the school, a baby being thrown in the furnace
Really?
Oh, because some dirty guy did something to a girl who was old enough now.
Well,
You know, I mean, and when someone tells one story, I always try to remember they're protecting themselves. And they only can tell the easiest one there is to tell. They can only tell a certain few. That iceberg's still underneath them.
yeah. This is such a moving conversation. And now we're going to our second topic, which is the orange shirt. I see Jeff is wearing a orange shirt, and we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. So that's our next topic for tonight, and we already sort of like got into it a few minutes early. So anyway, Jeff, you are a survivor of the residential school system, which according to my research, 150,000 children were, wrangled into that system, or that, I don't know what to call it, that experience.
Yeah.
So could you share something, like how do you feel now?
Well, I'll give you a little background on
Okay, yeah,
the
please.
residential school from my perspective anyway. I went there when I come from Banfield, and I attended there 1956 until 1969, until I basically graduated from high school. And it was tough. It's always been tough, but in my younger years it was really tough. I don't know if you can imagine a 6-year-old, getting taken away from your parents or your family and being put in a residential school. It's very difficult for the general public, I think, to understand from a child's point of view
Yes.
on what happened. I think more importantly, from a community point of view, when we were taken and shipped off to any community across Aboriginal community, all your children were basically taken away from you and shipped to residential school. So for me to try to understand why our communities are like this now, with the alcoholism and abuse and stuff like that, when their kids got sent away, there was nothing for them to do. You had an empty village without any kids, without a family. And our communities are, fairly small, maybe, 3, 4, 5, 600 people at the most. And so when when there's no kids around, how does your family cope with that? And of course you have, there's nothing to do. There's no kids to care for, no kids to cook for, no kids to clothe, no kids to wake up. So you're by yourself as a parent, trying to cope with that.
And this went on for years. I mean,
went on for years and years.
Were the children allowed to go home and visit for a while, or?
If you were lucky, if your family lived close, they came and got you, especially for the Christmas and the summer holidays. And even back then, it was kind of it was considered a privilege by the people in residential school that you were allowed to go home.
Oh wow!
So and parents being parents, they really tried to come get you with the little resources they had, and of course when they got home, well, especially during the summer, there was expectation. Now, how do we cope here with kids at home? I know when you have 3 or 4 children dumped on you, for a month and a half of the year, it's hard to adjust.
That's right.
It's a
Yeah.
huge adjustment.
Yeah.
It must have been very hard on the
One
parents.
thing we have to think about, Carol and Don, what Jeff's talking about is that by the time Jeff was in school, he was being returned to former students of that school
Yes.
with more horrific treatment. So to be even able to, the ability to want to go get your children when you're drowning sorrows already, however way you can. I mean, we can look at addictions today and know it takes us away from priorities. Well, years ago, those addictions, some of them still made it to that residential school to make sure they could see their child. The ones who weren't so lucky didn't have explanation. An explanation was necessary for a growing heart.
Yeah.
So I was just trying to imagine what it would be like for Jeff to be picked up by former students. What kind of trauma had to go through them to make that trip?
Well, it must have been so traumatizing to send them.
Well, that too. And
Yep.
then after the child gets old enough, how do you look at each other in the eye when the child gets old enough to say, you know?
Yeah, you
without
know what's
saying,
going to happen.
You knew what happened to me. Or you can't look at me for a reason. And then eventually we say, geez, did that happen to you? But we're all guessing it in silence. I mean, geez, there's dysfunction today. There's dysfunction today, and when there's in the family, there's still silence.
Yes, and this
In
trauma
today's
or this
society.
damage cascades even to this very day. Like it did not stop. I mean, the last residential school was closed in
1996.
1996. And the one here was closed. Was this one of the last that was closed? The one in Port Alberni? 'Cause
No,
Port Alberni.
Hot Springs Cove,
Yeah.
1996.
Okay.
But you know, when Jeff was talking earlier as well, I also want to look at the timeline. He said the parents had nothing to do anymore. Well, for a little stretch there, the parents were being strong. You know, the first group who went in, they were strong, and it was the.
Because I would
government.
imagine in your
Hold
case,
on.
your parents did go to residential school as well, right?
But hold on one
Okay,
second,
go,
please.
okay.
Sorry. But if we look at the timeline, what was created for those parents once the children were in school for 20 plus years? Those parents were still potlatching and having ceremonies, rituals. The potlatch came in 1886, 1951, 67 years, so 1884.
Okay.
Well, that's after the residential schools. Well, that was a decision made as a tactic because our people's spirits were still strong.
Yes.
Because the parents at home are still having rituals connected to the land and belief in their heart. Well, how come they still have that even though 20 or 30 years have gone by? Well, we got to fix that. It's now outlawed to gather in any potlatches. And they didn't try to understand. They just said gather. Because there was known stories here in our lands where elders were carried out just for playing a bone game, which isn't even a potlatch. A bone game, a gambling game, a fun game, and handcuffed and carried out of the hall because of their gathering, elders, people who were in the community.
So you weren't allowed, just because I've never heard this before,
The
and I just want
potlatch
to clarify, you weren't allowed to have a potlatch?
No, you weren't
No.
allowed to have a potlatch, sing
Or any
songs.
kind of ceremonies.
Okay, so
No
I didn't know this. It's
ceremonies.
something new to me. Sorry, I was just, I've never heard
Okay.
that before.
You
so
weren't
I'm
even allowed
curious.
to speak your own language.
No.
That's right.
And that's why the language has kind of gone, and you're getting it back now? Is
Well,
that,
we hope so. I believe.
Yeah.
Well, I'm a teacher of the language,
Yeah.
but I'm not a fluent speaker. I can read it very well. If we're looking in Ishaat, we have two people who don't admit they're fluent speakers, but they can speak, we believe, like we know. But that might be their own trauma why they don't admit it.
Yeah.
But that means two left in Ishaat, and up to those two people who are speakers, they say no. So we have 0 speakers left who are willing to commit to any development. The last one who admitted was my grandmother, Kathy Robinson. So within Sishat, we only have, if we're lucky, 2 speakers left, and they're all over the age of 85.
Oh.
And I don't
But
know
isn't there a
about
program in place that is for recovery of the language?
Yeah, there's programs that try to recover the language. In fact, there's
really great work
yeah,
right now.
a couple places in town here and a couple First Nations. I know Tishat has a language class, and like Trevor said, maybe not them. They might not be fluent as in the past, but at least there's a learning tool there where
Yeah.
they can
That's
grasp
right.
a lot of it.
yeah, I know. Well, I was telling you I was at something, and Moira was speaking, and I was blown away because
Yeah.
I'd never heard her speak in her language before, and I thought it was kind of cool,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah, I can't speak my language, so
Yeah.
to hear that was really neat.
Okay, so now in relation to this, there's the story about the orange shirt. Could you share something a little bit about, because you're wearing one.
Yeah.
Okay, so could you share a little bit about the story about the orange shirt?
Well, years ago, I recognized the orange shirt when this lady, I forgot her name.
Phyllis. Phyllis.
Phyllis
Yeah, Phyllis,
Webstad.
yeah, I watched her on TV, and the pain she went through when she was a young girl, when she got sent to residential school with her little orange dress, and when she got there, it got taken away from her. So she always remembered as she was growing up with that little orange shirt that her grandmother, bought for her to go to school, a brand new dress, and it got taken away. So she always remembered that, and that's what became the Orange Shirt Day. And I heard the story, and I wanted to recognize that and so along with my family and our First Nation and all First Nations picked up on that, and they start wearing orange. People started wearing orange shirts, and then gradually spread out into the community, the local schools, some of the businesses. They started wearing them. Say 10 years ago, they started the movement.
So it's not the color per se that, because we were discussing this a while ago, remember, Trevor, that it's not the orange shirt per se, it's the story behind the orange shirt.
Story
so
and the
it could have been an
symbolism.
orange something else.
Yeah.
Or even a
Or
different
it could have
color.
been a purple shirt. It could have been her favorite
Yeah.
purple shirt. We would have followed that.
Yeah.
Yep. So the story behind the orange shirt is the story of like Phyllis Webster. There's a nice book that you can get, and it will give you more information about that. I was doing some YouTube research and I heard Phyllis actually speak on the YouTube channel thing, and it was sort of like a very moving and heart-rending story. Like, so now the orange shirt is not something to be happy about. It's something to be at least something to be
Well, there's some pride
like
behind
you survived,
it now.
right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of pride behind it now, not only in age levels who are taking care of the younger, but I'm seeing at elementary school people wearing it as part of their fashion now. Kids just liking
It's
to wear
hard
an
to
orange
find
shirt.
an orange shirt.
You
I
can't.
struggled. I was lucky because my girlfriend Melanie Newcomus, she showed one that she had bought, and I'm like, "Where did you get that?" That was almost 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I called the lady, and I got 3, and now she owns she bought Ladybird.
Yeah, okay,
So
yeah.
then I got more because I needed them for the kids and all my staff But I mean, it was hard to get an orange shirt.
Yeah.
Like really hard. I have a whole bunch now, but
There you go.
yeah, but I'm not sharing. They're
Well, a
mine.
while ago, we'll not go to commercial break anymore because we might have technical difficulties. So we'll just continue. A while ago, Carol, you mentioned something about the Orange Bridge, and Trevor shared something very interesting. So,
Well, because on Facebook,
okay.
the very beginning, when they found the bodies in Kamloops, people were like, paint the bridge orange, paint the bridge orange. And then I heard, don't paint the bridge orange because that's not the right thing to do. And then now I'm seeing it all over Facebook again by another gentleman, paint the orange bridge. So, but Trevor made a good point. So I just want him to tell us what he thinks about the orange
Tell
bridge.
us about your view on the
I
Orange
quite
Bridge.
enjoyed it. I think it's very true.
Should we paint it orange?
I don't think we should.
Okay.
Yeah, you know what?
Explain.
There's some history to it. It's still called the Orange Bridge, even though it's gray, right? But when they repainted it gray, I was a child swimming along that river, and sandblasting and the chips all over the river, and it's not worth it with their salmon stocks the way they are now. With the state
There's more
of, state
damage
of
to the environment. Okay.
Yeah, and people might be able to say, well, we'll be sure of it, but that's what they said then too.
Yeah.
A huge tarp was hanging under, and it was all going to go in there. Pretty soon the wind blew and the tarp was off, and
Yeah.
I mean, so no, I don't think we should. But we were suggesting something that people have been doing handprints, and maybe there's an orange handprints you put along the bridge just for a memorial of some kind,
Without having to sandblast it all and do it all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our environment can't take that.
Yeah. And I think it's good to hear that. I think it's good to get that out there because I've never heard that perspective.
Right.
Right. And we don't want to wreck our environment.
No.
No. We're trying to replenish the ocean, not put garbage into it.
That's for
Yeah.
sure.
So technically, the Orange Bridge wasn't a symbol of anything because, as you said, it's not even part of the land.
Right. It's
Right.
not Sisha territory. It's beyond the Orange Bridge, just beyond the Orange Bridge is ours. And there's some property here that were given to some veterans along the highway that belong to individuals. So on this side of the highway. But once you pass that Orange Bridge, everything where the admin building is and up, it's Sisha. Everything along the river after the Orange Bridge was given to veterans who fought in the war.
I see. Well, I know this is completely off topic, but I noticed you've been holding that onto that feather. Would you want to say something about the feather?
Sure. You know what? I usually bring when I'm speaking a stick, but I left it in class. When I'm talking to students, I'll bring it there. But I just brought this only because my uncle always talked about the spotted tail feather.
Okay.
And on an eagle, they're called a nutshot. And he said singers used that when they were at their strongest, because the eagle can fly at its strongest when it's spotted. But anyway, so I brought this here tonight just for some grounding and guidance.
Okay.
And it was a spotted one because.
So that's a feather of an eagle?
Yeah, an eagle
okay.
feather. Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Plucked it this afternoon, Don.
Is he still alive?
Sorry.
No eagles were harmed in the filming of this episode.
Plucking is harmless. That's right.
Okay, so let's go to our third topic of the evening, which is about the residential school. Are there any callers or?
There's people watching, but nobody's asking questions.
So
right now I'm about the eagle. The eagle was found naturally dead. Conservation expert. We get our eagles from conservation. There you go, Don.
okay.
So this is totally off the topic, but I did a wedding for a native couple, and they gifted me a feather with all beading on the bottom and stuff. What is they never told me why they gave it to me. They just gave it to me. So is there a reason? Like, do you guys...
Is there
what's
a symbol
the difference between
or
a
something?
fancy feather and a regular feather?
One reasons.
Yeah, well, it doesn't. Well, doesn't have to be an eagle, but I think they gifted you to recognize your contribution to their wedding.
Okay, yeah.
And I think that's everybody does it in different societies. They just want to recognize you. It could have been in a box of matches for
I just think it's cool. Well, it's just very fancy at the bottom.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
hold on. What color is it?
Oh,
just kidding.
I don't know. I gotta go what?
It was orange.
No, it was not orange. No, it was not orange.
Yeah.
Well, now that you brought that up, I remember something Trevor was saying about your wealth is how you treat people. Could you share a little bit about that?
Sure. Wealth was measured on how your guests felt when they came into your territory, what you had to offer your people and community, right?
And a while ago you said that's kind of backfired on your people.
Well, I feel like it backfired when early settlers were coming to look for wealth, and the definition of wealth in both societies were a little different, right? So when they saw all this wealth and they knew we were welcoming people, there was a little advantage, to manipulate for a little while. Eventually, we put our heels in, but there was not much to be done.
No.
Okay, so how far back in history are we talking about? Like, when did this all begin to become, the way it was today? When settlers came, how long ago did the settlers come?
I just want to talk about Carol's feather first.
Okay, sure.
I should have brought it.
The gift
pretty
cool. What Trevor mentioned about, we share our wealth, and that's been our culture for centuries. We share our wealth, whatever we have. Now a lot of people don't know the real reason for potlatches is the rich share with everybody else. If you were a chief in high esteem and you collected wealth, or you had even an ordinary person had wealth, and they collected wealth, and their way of sharing that was to distribute it. So to me that's what it was to me, because for me, I was fortunate enough to work all my life, and I share what I do have sometimes, and a lot of times actually. In fact, we're gonna be doing one once this COVID thing is over, and so we were all equal as far as wealth was concerned.
Yeah.
In fact, I would was honored to hear him speak of that wealth, because he's probably more appropriate than I to speak of that, due to a seat that Jeff sits in as one of the chiefs of Hawaii. I'm not from that family, so it was well put.
Thank you for sharing that. So going back to my question, like, as far as you know, how far back in time are we talking about? When did this all begin? When did the settlers started coming and started invading?
As soon as starving started happening on the streets of Europe. That was the momentum builder. Let's send out another explorer. We need wealthier lands. People were living with suppression over there, in filth, lack of resources.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Filth in the streets. The royal family needed to provide, just as Jeff was talking, for their people.
Well, ironically, interesting, like, this is the first time I'm hearing about that narrative, because when you come to from where I come from, like, oh yay, somebody discovered us, like somebody discovered the Philippines. It's like, no.
Yeah, that's right.
Like Christopher Columbus discovered America. No. But that's the narrative now. So you think the narrative should change now that we're learning more and knowing more and more truth is coming to surface, don't you think?
It's got to shift, doesn't it? It does.
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
The narrative has to shift.
Well, if they don't shift it,
And
too,
it's
they
not
might
it's
lose
not
the
a pretty
good
story
ownership.
for some people. So now let's go to the sad story about the residential schools, because that's our third and final topic for this evening. So there's, according to my research, there was 150,000, and there was 1 or 2 residential schools here in Port Alberni, or just one.
There's one, but there's one in Howsett, one in Christie, which is Toluca territory. So basically, in our immediate area, there was 3, and I know there was 3 or 4 along the East Coast, so fairly close in proximity.
East Coast, Vancouver Island?
Yeah, on Vancouver Island, and there was others too on the mainland. And
But as far as Port Alberni, our locality is concerned, there was only one here.
there was only one, but I know it burned down before my time, and they rebuilt it eventually.
Yeah, I came across it in my research,
yeah.
and then they had to close for about 3 or 4 years, and then they reopened it, and then finally it closed down again.
See, I wondered how it burnt down, eh?
I don't know. I'm not going to go there. But the Port Player Dramatic Society did a play about the residential school, and there was, about how it burned down and all that stuff. And I didn't realize that it was related to this issue of the residential schools. So how do you feel about this issue now that it has sort of like exploded? It only came out now, right?
It's about time,
right?
really.
Necessary is
Like,
what I was going to
yeah.
say. Yeah.
It's time to put it in our textbooks and teach our kids, and they're more understanding and knowledge. Knowledge is important.
Because even in our conversation, this is the first time I've heard about lots of things.
How did we get to a place where societies accept one another, though? For instance, the shame hasn't been lifted outside of our community yet. People don't want to hear over and over how bad their ancestors were to people. So a way to reslant this, I always believe, is talking about everybody's First Nation. Everybody where you belong from, where that you belong to Earth, right?
Like your origin.
Yeah, because we all belong to Earth.
Yes.
We all do. But and when we can stand on that ground, we can start respecting whose land this is here. Right?
So I remember discussing this with you in our Zoom meeting. Like, to you, in the case of Jeff, you would rather be referred to as First Nation, but in your case, you would rather be referred to as Indigenous, because Indigenous is sort of like indicative of like your origin, like you came from the earth.
Yeah, sure. I think I said Sishaat.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I was thinking of my tribe for sure. Indigenous and First Nations are things we're owning for sure today. But man, we're Sishaat, and my grandfather, who had a full Irish father, I told Don if there was no racism and division, then perhaps we would be living in Ireland right now, not knowing who the First Nation we were. Because he's a Robinson, 100% Irishman who had...
I don't know. I'll still choose Port Alberni over Ireland.
There you go.
Okay, so let's going back to the residential school. According to my research, 60% of the residential schools were run by Catholics, and the others were run by the United Church and the Presbyterians and the Anglicans or something like that. In your case, Jeff, which religious group run your residential school?
Well, in the case of the Alberni, it was the United Church that ran it. Well, in my time anyway, it might have been, I think it was Presbyterian before that. But like you said, the church burned down, and for whatever reason, they changed.
Oh, okay.
Sad story about the religion and when you're taken away from your home community, and how I don't know how they come to the conclusion that you should be going to a United Church or a Roman Catholic Church, like in Mission, or I don't know if there was no really churches in the communities back then, and then they said, well, you belong to the Roman Catholic, you belong to the United Church or Presbyterian. So in some cases, your family was broken up because you know.
Oh,
they
even there, eh?
Yeah, they had churches in different. Well, the churches in residential schools were different denominations. So you know, we know one. Well, I know one case personally that the family was separated because for whatever reason, you know, one family went to Edmonton, or some of the siblings went to Edmonton, the residential school there, and some of them came to Alberni here.
Wow.
Yeah, you know, your own brothers and sisters were separated.
Wow.
During residential school.
Did you have a sibling who was also in residential school with you?
Yeah, I had three. I had a older sister, and two younger brothers. So there's a lot of cousins, relatives that went to residential school. You know, I always tell a story about my sister who was a lot what 3 or 4 years older than I am. Went to residential school, and we were separated right at the grounds. You know, we weren't allowed to visit each other on just Sunday afternoons. We're allowed to visit, you know, our relatives, our siblings, our cousins on the other side, the girls, eh?
Okay.
And vice versa.
But you're still within the school grounds.
Within the school grounds, but you know, yeah, I could be from here to you, but I wasn't allowed to communicate with my sister.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
unless it was like a Sunday where you're allowed.
Well, even the residential school at, you know, there's some tea shop there, and they weren't allowed to communicate. There was a fence along the gate, and they weren't allowed to communicate. You know, if Trevor had a brother there or sisters, they weren't allowed to communicate because that's the way it was. We had to stay 10 feet away from the fence. Or well, if it was Trevor's siblings, they weren't allowed to go within 10 feet of the fence to talk to their brothers or sisters or even their parents. So that's the kind of culture we were brought up in, you know. And I always compare it to the prison system, even though I've never been there, but you see them on the movies on how prisoners were treated in hardcore federal penitentiary, and that's what I compare my life to. Even though I survived, you know, that they formed alliances and gangs and the whole bit, and you know there were fights there too, and you know because people were from different communities.
It was all survival.
Yeah.
Yes, that's my after hearing your story.
Yeah.
That is my next question. What kept you going? What helped you survive?
Well, for me it was exploring the outside community. You know, in my case, we had a lot of activities outside, especially sports activities. We played I played a lot of soccer and did gymnastics and basketball. So when you did that, you're allowed to go outside and play out, you know, say teams in Port Alberni and Courtenay, Comox, even the other residential school, Cooper Island. I always remember going there and playing the local soccer team there. So that was my escape, I guess, basically. Maybe one day a week, Saturdays, and Sundays, like I said, we're allowed to visit our siblings on the other side of the fence. And you know, it still hurts me today, and hurts my sister, who is my older sister, and she felt the responsibility to look after a 7-year-old kid, but she couldn't do it because she was on the other side of the fence.
We do have a question that's come in. They want to know if the government compensates the churches as if they were working for them. Do you know anything about that?
I think they did. The churches are, you know, of course they had to make some money somehow, so they were compensated, I believe, you know,
I
from
think
the
the word
government.
is funded.
Funded, yeah.
Well, I'm just going
okay.
by what the question
Yeah.
is. I like to read it exact so I don't get it wrong. Okay.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about the Pope's visit? I heard he's on his way to do a big
I was
apology.
going to ask that question, but you beat me to it.
Do you hope he's going to apologize?
I know he wants to visit the
Why
leaders.
hasn't he already? Why does
Yeah.
he have to come here to apologize? Like,
Yeah,
what, he
you
just
know,
apologized from the Vatican
I don't want
already?
to talk about him till he goes. No.
Well, I think our first leaders, our First Nations leaders, wanted him to visit.
Yeah.
Personally, I think the layman, couldn't care less about his visit because it might be just there for showmanship or stuff like that. Because personally, it doesn't bother me that he's going to visit, or no matter what kind of words he's going to say, it's not going to impact the way I felt, the way I was.
It's not going to change anything.
Yeah, the way I went through life.
Yeah.
But I think if he visits our leaders, I think they might have a.
Because I feel like if I was in your shoes and he's coming now and he's
Yeah.
going to apologize, it's almost laughable because
Yeah.
it's a little too late. Like, come on.
Yeah, like what
Yeah.
for?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to make a big show out of it. That's just my own personal opinion.
Yeah,
but
if you wanted to come over in here and learn, you'd stay a while.
yeah.
You'd get to know the people a little bit. I know he's probably way too busy for that, but you know what?
Yeah, but
Yeah, it's not just a token visit,
yeah.
Well,
That's
speaking, just going backtracking a little bit about the question, like, okay, if the church is compensated or not, never mind that. But is there some sort of like retribution or compensation or something for the families that have been affected by the residential schools
Well,
that you know of?
There was a few years ago to people that went to residential school. They did make retribution to them, but because I went for 13 years, I had to make an application and I got retribution.
So is that still ongoing for people who can make claims?
In fact, there is for day schools for
Right.
people that went to day schools. I don't know too much about it, but they had day schools where the people went, where students went there, and they actually went. Most of them went home after that, but still, there was that stigma of an authority looking after you, kind of thing.
So a day school's like now where you go to school and come home. It's not like you don't stay there.
Well, I don't know too much about it, but
okay.
how it was run or anything, but basically the same principle, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we have 1 minute left. I'll let Trevor and Jeff give their final
Well,
message.
I think we should also let Trevor and Jeff talk about what we had talked about earlier
Kawasa?
for people who,
Yeah, okay.
have been watching that.
Okay, but like I said, anyway, we'll
super
catch it in editing. Let's go
Yeah.
on. We're not limited for time, really.
Okay. About Quat's office?
Yeah,
then?
okay, please.
Definitely. Quat's office, NTC. If you look under anywhere on the white pages or anywhere in the phone books, if you want to find the number Quatsa, Quuasa, Quatsa, and they have an office on 5th and Redford here. For anybody who might have been triggered or affected by the conversations here today, they have a big resource, a big team of things that can help you during this time.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Jeff?
And it was nice to talk about some of the stories that are coming out now, and hopefully people will start talking about it. Both in Indigenous community and the other community, or the general public.
Okay. All right, I guess thank you so much. First of all, I want to say I am honored that the two of you have come to our show, and thank you for sharing your stories and your views and your opinions. And for all of you who are watching out there, there is a positive and wonderful direction that we're going to. At least it's going to be a long time coming, but we're going to get there. Yes, Jeff? Oh, sorry, Trevor.
We're going
That's
to
all right,
change
Carol. Carol. Yeah, I just realized that
I'm
Jeff
just
got to
believing
say
it.
something, and all I had to do was plug Quatsa here. So.
Okay, that's fine.
You
Go ahead.
know, but I really feel like that I want to give respect to the survivors. And if anything, we were thrown in a hole to dig ourselves out of without understanding why. So what happened was people were dirtier than others. People were in the darkness more than others. But we're at present day today. And what I have to realize is that the reason I can stand here and speak like that is because people climbed on each other's backs to get out of this hole.
Oh.
They however they could, whatever that looked like in our families, they had to get out of that hole. And today we stand, I believe, out of that hole. But it wasn't without stepping on each other's backs, ripping at each other's hair, limbs. And now that we stand out of here, we got to look a little bit, and we're a little dirty from the hole that we've been in.
Mm-hmm.
So we are just coming to terms with a lot of this stuff here today too. Acceptance more. And the reason why we can accept, and we said this earlier, is because other people are now having empathy and understanding of our history.
And you don't need to be silent anymore.
Yeah. Well, if people accept now, well, now I can have a voice. If you were shunned and pushed the other way, well, we've seen that too many times due to the racism that was laid out in front of us. So we just stayed quiet. Why bother? Nobody believes us anyway. So now that people believe us, we have a foundation to build on now. But are you going to let us build it alone? The foundation's there. Who's going to be a part of it?
Well, we all shouldn't we?
That's what
Just like what Jeff was saying, like the day shouldn't be celebrated just today. It should be every day, because there's a lot of work that has to be done.
Yep.
And we're talking about years, no, hundreds of years, centuries maybe.
Well, if we
there's a lot.
If we can look at this, was it 51 years? Did I say earlier? 1951. But anyways, it's been 21 plus years that the potlatch ban was on, that it's been legal now. Yet our songs aren't being sung like they used to. What I'm getting at is that we're at 70-something years since the potlatch ban, 1951 till now. What is that? 70 years?
I'm not good with math.
Yeah. We had
I'm not good at math.
70 years of our songs and potlatches being legal, yet we're nowhere near where they were when they took it away. Even though we look strong, but we're nowhere near the ones before. That's a lot of work. So when we're talking healing, it's going to take double or triple the amount of time that the suppression was applied.
Well, the good thing is it has begun. And another better thing is it will continue. With people like you and people like us who are open to the conversation, and no more judgment, no more racism, no more biases. Hopefully, this will all be part of our wonderful Alberni Valley experience. Thank you for coming. That's all the time we have. We'll see you next time on The Wave.
Shoot.